Hi and good evening. So this is the first of a series of live chats that I'm going to do, just covering the basics of becoming a driving instructor and the things that you need to think about and go through. The reason for doing a live rather than just a video is people can take part and ask lots of questions. This one's very basic on the basic principles and the basic things you need to be thinking about and the process and things like that. So it'll probably be quite short, and then followed by others that will cover things like training, choices and costs, which is pretty important. Being the right person, that's hugely important as well. We'll quickly talk about that today. The getting started, so doing your CRB and why it's important to get that started straight away. Even if you're just considering it, you might as well get that sent off. Um, Tips for part 1, 2 and 3 and ways of training and things like that, and obviously asking any questions that you want to ask. You can do this every few days. I think the next one will be tomorrow evening, around tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock, so I might as well do it then, and then we'll look at a diary and we can do them when I can, really. The bottom line is that you can look back at them if you want to, but obviously being live, much more interactive. But it is Saturday evening, so I don't expect this evening's one to be particularly interactive, but it will stay on the site or stay on the Facebook page. Okay, so let's get started. So today's we're just talking about the process of becoming a driving instructor. So few rules really. You need to have a full British driving license, and you need to have had that for 3 years. There are other rules for European license and things, but I'll let you look online that rather than getting all confused with that. But the basics of a British system, it's 3 years and 21 years old by the time you qualify. So you don't have to be that age or that number of long to start the process. I've asked the DVSA this just the last few days, and they haven't really clarified it. But as I understand it, as long as you send off for your badge within a year of passing your part 3, then you're okay. So in theory, you could pass just after you're 20 and still take up the badge when you're 21. You need to clarify that. The website says, and the person I spoke to, the DVSA, said they normally only allow people to start training within 6 months of being 21 or within 6 months of the 3 years. So that's just worth considering. Really. Please do ask questions on this. It's the whole point of it being live. More people are joining now, so where are they going? So please ask. So 3 years, 21 is the basic criteria. Number of points is something that people ask me about a lot. So you have to be a fit and proper person, and the points, as I understand, if you're 5 points, you're okay. If you're more than 5 points, then it will be looked into. Had someone ask me the other day who had 9 points and 3 points were just going to come off, and whether they'd be okay with 6, but I can't give you an answer. You'd have to just put in for it and see. So you do a CRB, which is a criminal records check, which is free. You can do it online, and if you just Google become a driving instructor, you'll get the DVSA site up. Make sure it's the government one, and it has a process where it asks you lots of questions, not lots, it takes a couple of minutes. How old are you, how long you had a license, all that sort of stuff. You click those, and then it gives you an option to send off your CRB. And I would, if you've got any doubts about your number of points or any other convictions, then I would get this process started before you go any further. Really, it's really important to find out whether you're going to be eligible or not. Criminal convictions will be taken into course depending on when they were, what they were, and all that type of stuff. And I can't answer you that, and the DVSA won't answer that on a generic basis. So you have to send off for that. So you have to have the number of years your license, etc. You have to be a fit and proper person. Most people have had points before, but they'll be okay, etc. But yeah, send off and find out. Then once you've been accepted, your CRB's been accepted, you'll be sent you'll be sent a certificate number for that, and then you go back online and you register as a driving instructor. It doesn't mean you can teach or anything. You're just registering your interest. They will then look at your CRB and other information that you supply, like licenses and things like that, and then they will send you back a number, and that's your personal reference number, and that will stay with you for your career as a driving instructor. Even if you go away, come back, fail, come back, you will always keep that number. And once you've got that, then you can start the part 1. Up to this point, it's all completely free and doesn't cost you anything, so it's certainly worth giving it a go. Then you do your part 1. Your part 1 is basically your theory. So it's a theory test. As we go through this, we're going a lot more, but you've got a theory test. You've got to pass that. It's 2 parts to it. Has a perception test and a knowledge test. Then you've got you've got to pass that before you can do part 2. Sort of makes sense, really, doesn't it? And the part 2 is your driving ability test. So it's a driving test which lasts approximately an hour. includes manoeuvres like turn the road, reverse around a left-hand, right-hand corner, parking in a boat or behind a car, and an emergency stop and a turn in the road, and includes angled starts and downhill starts and uphill starts and things like that. But again, when we do the individual ones, we'll go into those things a lot more. But pretty straightforward. The theory is pretty straightforward as long as you put in the work. It's good to have some sort of guidance and support. Our website has over 50 videos on the part 1 and part 2 linked together, going through the essential skills and what it means and things like that. It's important that with the part 1 particularly, you don't just learn it by rote, because if you just learn it by rote, it won't help you in your part 2 or part 3. It's about understanding and knowing and knowledge. So you would, for your part 1, you can study it on your own, but you have to study in conjunction with the essential skills, the highway code, things like that, and the questions, not just doing the questions to get them right, because you're going to fall over when you need deeper knowledge and understanding, more importantly, later on. So part 2 tests your understanding and your ability to put something into action, because if you can put it into action, you're much more likely to be able to teach it, and by putting it into action, you're much more likely to be understanding it more rather than just knowing the answer, because you can put things into action, you can react. The part 2, I tend to call it an advanced driving, they call it an advanced driving test, but I would call it an advanced thinking test, and it's about planning ahead. It's about seeing what's going on up ahead, reacting early, because the bottom line is when your bum's in the passenger seat, when you're teaching people, you have to look well ahead, you have to react early to give instructions nice and early, otherwise everything falls over. Can't give full talk-throughs if you're late, you can't give timely instructions if you're late. So it's important that everything's nice and early, and by the advanced driving test, or the advanced thinking test I prefer to call it, you have to demonstrate that. So things like continual movement, not stopping at traffic lights, not stopping at roundabouts, unless you have to, of course. But if you're planning well ahead, you can invariably keep the vehicle moving. It's good for eco-friendly driving, and also it's just you have to plan ahead to achieve that. Keeping a steady speed limit on a dual carriageway or motorway, steady 70 or whatever the speed limit is, because that's actually more difficult than it sounds. By doing that, again, you're demonstrating planning, because if you haven't got good planning, you won't be able to maintain a steady speed. So that's what they're looking at there. Pretty straightforward. Lots of hours, as I say, you have various manoeuvres, you have some show me, tell me questions, but as I said, we'll go through all this in more detail at a later date. And the part 3, you can't take the part 3 until you pass the part 2. Getting a theme here, aren't we? When you get to this point, when you pass the part 2, you can do something called a trainee license, which means you can teach for money. The last 6 months, you possibly could get an extension, but I certainly wouldn't rely on that. And you would need to sponsor a driving school, or a driving instructor at least. You would need 40 hours in-car tuition for the part 3, which you don't need if you don't take a training license. There's no minimum number for a part 3 of hours, but you are looking at 40 to 50 hours probably. And then you'd have to do additional 20 hours within 3 months of the training license starting, to make sure you're up to speed and you're doing the correct things, really. After that, then you can take a part 3 at any point during that training license, before, after, or middle of it, and you would normally only be granted one. It is possible to get another one depending on personal circumstances, but as I said, I wouldn't rely on that. So when it comes to part 3, to take the part 3 test, you don't need any official training, but certainly you would make sense to have some, and you could do lots of ways of training, whether it would be video sites and a trainer, whether it would be video sites and a buddy, whether it would just be a trainer, whether it would just be a buddy. But again, when we talk about part 3 during the next week or so, we're going into a lot more details. It's just really an outline. But as I say, you don't need a set number of hours. So if you decided to do training, we're getting on well, you have background in teaching, etc., and you can do it after 20 hours, then you can take it. Be aware you're only allowed 3 attempts, and the same with part 2, which I should have said. You're only allowed 3 attempts. You've got to be a bit careful, make sure you're ready, and make sure someone guides you like a trainer. Part 3, you're only allowed 3 attempts again, and you have to pass the 3rd attempt within 2 years of passing your part 1. So you've got a 2-year window from when you pass your part 1, which is a reasonable length of time. You are looking at average 9 to 12 months to qualify as a driving instructor in a realistic way. You couldn't do it quicker. I've had people do it a lot quicker than that. Had people take a lot longer. So, but it depends on how much work you're willing to put in and all that sort of stuff. So once you've done a relevant training, you can take your part 3. You can take it after the 2 years, as long as the attempt you're going to take, let's say it's the 3rd attempt, is booked before the 2 years, and then you're okay to take it. At the moment, that's not a law, no rule or law. It's just a concessionary thing the DVSA do, but you can't rely on those things because it's not written down anywhere. But it has been the case up till now. But I wouldn't build everything you do on that. So you want to try and get those 3 attempts in. You are allowed 3 attempts. The 3 attempts are £111 at the moment, I think, and so it's the same as the part 2. and I think the part one's about 82. I should look that before I came on, but I forgot. So you want to make sure you're ready. You're better off taking some extra training rather than spending out on the test. And the bottom line is you can't fluke these tests. You have to know what you're doing. Particularly part 3, but part 2 as well. It becomes very obvious if you're inconsistent. So that's basically an outline of what you need to do. You need to make sure you're the right person, but we're going to do another live chat on this later on, in the next few days, because if you're not the right person, you're going to fall over at this point. I would say that if you weren't willing to do 2 A levels, then you shouldn't start this process, because it's equivalent to doing 2 A levels. So if it would take you 2 years to do 2 A levels, then it's going to take you 2 years to do this, 3 years, 4 years. And remember, you're probably working, got family life and all that sort of stuff to put in mind. When I say 2 A levels, I don't mean academic A levels, as in you have to be academic. You have to be willing to put in the hours required. It's the same sort of hours required. So watching people like me on video, going out with buddies, obviously with the trainers, and just generally eating, breathing and thinking this thing, going on forums and Facebook and all those types of things just to get that information. You have to be willing to do that amount of work. You can't just sail through this. It does really require quite a lot of input from yourself. So you need to make sure you've got the backing of your friends and your family and all that sort of thing. Otherwise it becomes a bit of a chore. And I would hate anyone to start and then fall over. And the reason for this set of videos is a lot of people have sold a dream. If you go to some of the big national schools, for example, they will basically say you got 2 arms, 2 legs and 2 grand and you'll be fine. But not necessarily. You've got to be the right mindset, you've got to be willing to put in the work, and you've got to realise that you've got to live and breathe it, really. And if you're not willing to live and breathe it or think you can, then it's probably not worth starting the process. The beauty is you can start the process for free. So you can join our site for free and do the part 1 stuff, or most of it for free, and you can certainly send off your CRB and make sure that you can go on the register for free, and that gives you time to sort of think about it and look around. But it's not going to be free. If you look at training with a trainer on one-to-one basis, you're looking at about £2,000. If you're looking at self-training to a certain degree, using a site and a buddy and possibly dipping out of a trainer, you probably do it for £1,000. There are national schools that will bring it a lot cheaper than that, or about £1,000 or cheaper. What I would say on that is look at the overall cost it's going to cost you to qualify, as opposed to what you're going to pay out at the beginning. And what I mean by that is a lot of people that pay out the £1,000, also £1,000 is fine, but end up doing a lot of extra training with someone like myself. That's what I spend my days doing. Other trainers out there will do a lot of what we call rescue training, and that's 50, 60, 70 pounds an hour. That's soon going to rack up. So don't get bamboozled by one nice big cost. And we'll talk about costs and stuff more tomorrow. But don't also try and avoid paying up front, and certainly don't pay for part 1. You can do part 1. Self-study can work. I saw on somewhere today people saying, oh, you can't self-study, you have to have a trainer. Well, I can see what they're thinking, but if you've got, like, our site will go through the essential skills with you, the videos, and they go through the essential skills and how that links to the part 1. And as long as you're doing it in such a way where you're not just learning the questions by answer, like I say, and you're reading the books and you're really studying it, then with maybe a little bit of input from someone, then it can be, you can do it self-training to a lesser or more degree. But it's certainly possible to self-train most of it with a bit of guidance, maybe. But yeah, don't learn them by rote, because you're not going to learn them for the long term by doing that. Okay, so that's basically your outline. No questions coming in, which is absolutely fine. It is a Saturday evening. I just wanted to get this down on video, really. So tomorrow evening, same time, we'll do your training choices and costs, which we sort of touched on a little bit there, but I'll go into a lot more detail about all your options, whether it be self-training, etc., and what sort of costs you're going to be looking at for that. But says, I'm doing part 3, have failed my first 3 attempts, but I'm thinking of quitting. Okay, see if there's any more. Yeah, I mean, it would be completely up to you. I went round twice. I don't know what that tells you, really. You can take out of that what you want, but sorry, first 2 attempts, right? It's not 3 attempts. No, it's up to you, because you've obviously got the costs of the test again and so on. But the reason you may have failed before is you may not have known quite what was required, and that's without sounding the site at the time. It's not what this is about, but our site will tell you exactly what's required and give you all the information. You go in with a completely different mindset. And even if you don't do it very well, the examiner just wants to know that you know what you're doing, and then they will pass you if you give them enough stuff to do that. So just because you failed twice doesn't mean you're going to third or third time. You do need to do something different, because the first sign of madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So make sure you're doing something different. You've taken extra training, you've taken extra advice, on here, for example, and then there's no reason why you can't do it. It's completely up to you, because obviously it's another test fee, but you don't want to chuck away what you've done so far. The thing I would think before you quit is, do you want this? Do you want to be a driving instructor? Are you passionate about this? Is it something you really want? And if that's the case, don't quit. Find a way of passing. Find a way of making it work for you. If it's that you've bit fed up with it, or you're not really keen anymore, that's a different story. But it could be the training process that you're fed up with, and not the actual potential of being an instructor. I've changed trainers, and my new one is better and has taught me more, but I'm not sure I want to carry on. I can't really advise you on that particularly, because it really is a personal thing, isn't it? I went round twice. I failed 3 times. I got fed up with it, and then worked in a factory, fed up with that, and decided to come back to it. But that's a really personal choice. It's not something I can necessarily advise you on, because it is really down to you and what you feel. If you want to give me a call next week sometime, between Monday and Friday, I'm more than happy to take a call and have a chat with you, and then that'd be a lot better than trying to sort of talk to you on here, because it's not very personable or personal, and I can ask you more questions and dig a bit deeper. But don't chuck it out just yet. Just really consider it. You've come a long way. You're nearly at the end. It's a bit like seeing the end of the tunnel, tripping over a couple of times, and then thinking, oh no, I'm going to turn around and go back. You could do, but you're very nearly the end. So just consider it. And so if you want to give me a call, numbers all over the site, please give me a shout. Okay, so it's a very quick outline of the process of becoming a driving instructor. Pretty simple, stuff's available online, but I just wanted to give that chance for people to ask me questions and things. And so tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, we'll do training, choices and costs. That's going to be much more interesting, because I'll break it down to all the different options you've got, and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a good weekend.